Hello and welcome to this edition of BizWatch. I'm Qi. The G20 finance ministers and central bank governors ended their 7th annual meeting hosted by China. The group comprises the G7 and major emerging nations. They say they're determined to enhance worldwide cooperation and realize balanced and orderly economic development.
Delegates from the group of 20 nations say they will implement economic policies and accelerate structural adjustment to resolve imbalances and overcome risks. For the host China, the meeting was a chance to benchmark its economic progress.
The meeting provides China with a good opportunity to consult with other nations in the world. China's market economy system is in its transitional phase and needs improving to be in line with the international finance framework and trade conventions.
The G20 was established in 1999. Its members account for 2/3 of the world's population, 80% of its trade, and 90% of global GDP. Li Zhuamiao for BizWatch.
During the G20 meeting and the 17th session of the China-U.S. Joint Economic Committee, I spoke with Zhou Dunren, Deputy Director of Shanghai's Puzhong Institute for the U.S. economy. He analyzed the impact of the meetings on the next moves of the Chinese government and central bank in terms of developing China's economy and its financial sector. This is the first time for China to host the G20 meeting. So what do you think is the real significance of this?
Well, I think this time the fact that China played the host to this G20 meeting is highly significant. Right. First of all, it shows the recognition by the international community of the importance of China. After all, China is now one of the major players in the world economy, and particularly in the finance area. And secondly, as we know, that G20 is now actually playing a very important role. Its importance is ascending. To some extent, G20 is becoming more important than G7. As we know, G20 accounts for 2/3 of the world population, accounts for 90% of the GDP of the world, accounts for 80% of all the world trade. So that's why, China should be very happy playing host to the G20.
We understand a number of hot issues were discussed during the meeting and also the 17th Sino-U.S. Joint Economic Committee that followed the G20 meeting. For example, one of the hot issues that was discussed was the currency reform of China. So how do you expect the China Central Bank or the Chinese government to respond to this discussion?
Well, this time it's really good to hear from Mr. Snow that China has made a very important move on July the 21st by allowing the Chinese currency to be de-pegged from the dollar and also to introduce the new regime. And this time I did not hear much voice or comments from Mr. Snow and some other people who are here pressing China for appreciating this currency. In other words, now they work very much on the exchange ratio rather than exchange regime. It is very much anticipated that China will gradually relaxing the control in the capital accounts. Actually, what is more important is not, what is the actual exchange rate, 1 to 8, 1 to 7. Right. What is more important is that China would gradually open these, we have dozens of items under the capital account. We'll open them one by one. To the pace which is good for China, which is also good for the world.
Right. And the second issue that was discussed during the meetings was the trade relations between China and the U.S. and especially in the area of textile products. Do you think these two meetings might help resolve this issue?
I'm not sure because these three gentlemen, they are not directly responsible for trade. It should be more in the case of what we call the Department of Commerce. And also, it's called a trade representative. These people are more directly involved. But anyway, coming here to China, discussing with the Chinese leaders now, might help the American understanding of the situations here in China. Actually, based on the experience of the negotiations between China and the EU, we know actually the best solution is for each side to make some concessions. Right. And eventually we'll reach to a happy ending. And that's what China wants from the United States. We have to also look at the cotton farmers in the United States. Right. If the really wants you to push the Chinese textiles and garments out of the American market, China would not be buying American cotton. And of course, there are some other commodities, some other things which will be affected. It doesn't make much sense for them to argue that so many people, textile people in the United States are, putting out of jobs. Well, it is painful for the particular person, for the particular business. But that doesn't make a good reason. Here in China, we have 19 million textile workers and garments workers directly involved, and those indirectly involved should be 100 million.
Right.
So that sort of argument doesn't stand.
Well, although a lot of issues during these meetings were emphasized between China and the U.S., actually this G20 meeting has participants from all over the world, and not only from developed countries, but also from representatives of major developing countries. So some people raised this question during the meeting. They're saying the Chinese government is on the one hand instituting macro control measures in the country to ensure a soft landing of the Chinese economy. But on the other hand, a lot of Chinese companies, especially state-owned enterprises or big companies, are doing a lot of overseas mergers and acquisitions in the first half of this year. So it seems like they're contradictory to each other. So what do you think of this?
Well, there may seem to have some contradictions, quote unquote, but actually I don't believe there is actually much of a contradiction here, because Chinese case is somewhat unique and special. First of all, the macro control in our Chinese economy development, which took place about 2 years ago, was absolutely necessary. Several sectors in the Chinese economy was overheated, and if the government without acting, then we might have got into serious troubles now. But on the other hand, for the Chinese companies to go abroad to make mergers and acquisitions in the world is also another need. For example, now we need to assure that China gets the adequate supply of energy and raw materials. China is a big country, but per capita, China is very poor in energy and in raw materials now. And in 2003, China used up almost 1/3 of many of the raw materials of the whole world. That is too much. That is not sustainable. On the other hand, the Chinese companies, they may do well, they may produce, millions of products flooding the world market now. They do not have many good brands in the world. They do not have good distribution channels outside China world. And also there is another problem is they do not have the proprietary, technology, which means the patents and other things now. And one of the shortest way, and perhaps effective way, is to make acquisitions. And this is actually a general practice. I mean, it's quite common in the world market and in the developed world.
Mr. Zhou said while encouraging Chinese firms to expand overseas, the government should provide adequate support in terms of legal and accounting advices.